content and exciting information to share with you. So it's helpful to have everybody here right as we start. Of course, I have Crystal supporting with the tech, and she'll let anybody in as they come along. But I'm just gonna get things started right away, not postpone. So thank you. Hello, I am pleased to introduce today's session. This is part of a series called Engaging Women in Active Living. And this session is about flexible programming for the purpose of maximizing participation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to connect with the land that we're on currently. We are fortunate enough to be gathering from many different territories today, and we want to recognize the original occupants of the places where we reside, and pay respects to Indigenous people's beliefs and connections to the land. This has been taught to me as especially important because we're here and we're gathered for the purpose of knowledge sharing, which has been oppressed and continues to be oppressed for many, many years. And it has social implications, it has knowledge translation implications. And so it's important to call that out and understand the privilege that we have to be amongst each other today, and sharing on the land that we're on. So I want to acknowledge that I'm meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And this is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto, where I am currently, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. At Canadian Women in Sport, we like to take a moment to share a bit about the 5 calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation report that are sport related. As I go over these, I wish that you reflect on them and how you can action on them in your daily life, because they do come across as high level policy, but as leaders in the sports sector, we have a responsibility and an obligation to see how we can integrate these changes into our lives on a daily basis in order to take steps towards reconciliation. So the first of which is that the stories of Aboriginal athletes are being told, that there's support for long-term Aboriginal athlete development, that the barriers present in the Physical Activity in Sport Act are reduced and the inclusion of Aboriginal peoples is promoted, that sport policies, programs, and initiatives are inclusive of Aboriginal peoples by providing stable funding and access, athlete development, sport leaders who are culturally relevant or have received some form of anti-racism training, and that Indigenous peoples' territorial protocols are respected and that local Indigenous communities are engaged in international sporting events. Indigenous women and girls are underrepresented in sport in this country, and they face multiple barriers to participation at all levels. It's our intention at Canadian Women in Sport that in addition to these calls to action, we continue to build relationships that will allow us to better address this gap through our work. So once again, I ask that you reflect on the information shared and recognize how these calls to action can be applied to your involvement in sport and society more broadly. So what you see on the screen here is a quote from Lilla Watson. It's possible you've heard it before, but I'd love to share it again. And she says that if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound with mine, then let us work together. Lilla Watson is an Aboriginal elder, activist, and educator from Queensland, Australia. And these words came in response to individuals coming to her and asking, how can I help? What do Aboriginal people want? No one is in a position to save anyone, is the message that I understand from it. We're all, it is for all our benefit that we strive for an equitable society. And with that, I also want to acknowledge a happy Black History Month. Our agenda for today. So the content that you're going to be hearing from today comes from one of our program managers, Shelley Callahan. She's been involved in one capacity or another with Canadian Women in Sport for many, many years now. And a lot of the learnings that are going to be shared today come from her effort through a variety of programs across this country, working with women from age 18 all the way through to 80, and understanding what are those barriers to participation in sport and what are the most optimal solutions to addressing them. So we have Shelley Callahan to thank for the core presentation of this workshop. We'll begin by discussing CPRA and Canadian Women in Sport. So, the two organizations that have come together today to bring this presentation to life. We'll talk about gender equity and really those foundational concepts from which we draw a lot of this information. We'll cover the challenges to participation and the effective solutions. And then you'll get to hear from our regional guest speakers today. So Lindsay Johnston and Beth Hudson, who are going to be giving you some insights into programs that they've run to engage women in sport and physical activity. And I'm really, really excited for this part. And then lastly, we'll touch base on next steps. What can you do with this information? How can we carry the torch forward? So a bit about Canadian Parks and Recreation. This is a national organization dedicated to realizing the full potential of parks and recreation as a major contributor to community health and vibrancy. This organization has a 60-year history, and CPRA has been the national voice for parks and recreation, advancing the collective interest of our members. It's a national network dedicated to the well-being of people, community, and the natural and built environments. And lastly, CPRA provides services for their members and partners that cultivate a dialogue, learning, and innovation. So Canadian Women in Sport is not 60 years old. We are only 40 years old. And you might know us as our former name, which is Cause. But we have really the same vision and mission as in previous years. Our intention is to build a more gender equitable sport space in Canada. And the way we do that is working at the systems level with phenomenal partners like the Canadian Parks and Rec Association to be able to disseminate this information, support organizations with their policy development and implementation, and really create better opportunities for women and girls to participate in sport and eventually lead in sport. So how did this initiative come to be? How did these workshops get built? In 2018, the Government of Canada announced a target to achieve gender equity in sport at every level by 2035. The overall goal of this project is to increase the retention and participation of women and girls in recreation sport in Canada. These are the special interest groups within that umbrella of Canadian women and girls. So girls age 9 to 15, new mothers, women age 55 plus, and women and girls with intersecting identities. All right, we're on to our next section. So now we'll be discussing really those foundational terms and knowledge as they relate to gender equity. As a sport equity organization, we deal a lot with equity and equality. They sound quite similar, and folks will, use them interchangeably, but there is a significant difference. And to use the metaphor shared on screen, equality offers everybody the same resources equally. And there's an assumption there that if we all have the same resources, we would all be able to achieve the same. But that's not the case. We know that's not the case in reality. And we want to take an equitable approach to our programming, policy development, and what have you. And how does that look? It's providing resources to meet the needs of individuals. So when you see on the left, everybody is offered the same bicycle and it's only beneficial to one person. On the right, everybody receives exactly what they need and they can achieve the same, they can meet the same finish line that way. Intersectionality is a term you might have heard as well, and oftentimes it is maybe used in not necessarily the most appropriate sense, but really it's a term that was coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a lawyer and activist out of the United States. And she determined this word, or this word was came to fruition when she was looking at the way that Black women in the United States were treated by law enforcement. And so not only was it impacted by their race, but also their gender, which creates this intersect. And so we can't look at groups of people. We can't look at women and girls as a homogenous group and understand that they move through the world in the same way. That's not the case. There are different aspects to our identity that impact how we move through the world, and those need to be a consideration at the organizational and individual level. And that's the idea of intersectionality. So we want to touch on a few actions that you can take going into this workshop and in your role as sport and recreation leaders. So we ask that you speak up, be vocal about equitable access, and question policies and practices that limit participation and leadership opportunities for women. We want to celebrate women participants by attending events, writing stories, creating awards. We want to train and certify women to be instructors, coaches, officials, apprentices, leaders in training, and board members, all the way through to leadership. Recruit women leaders for boards, committees, staff positions. Invite women to participate and lead. Don't wait for them to come to you. We want to communicate opportunities and let women know about events and funding and resources. Educate yourself and others. Understand the barriers to participation that women face, and share this information with others to find collective solutions and create change. Lastly, there are resources out there like the Gender Equity Lens training. That's an e-module developed by Canadian Women in Sport. And if it's out there, we want you using it. We want you sharing it within your organizations to be able to build knowledge, institutional knowledge. All right, lastly, I just want to touch on what our desired outcomes are for the workshop today. So we want you to be able to leave with an understanding of the challenges that adult women face to becoming and staying active for life. Understand what motivates adult women to participate, and have the ability to assess and apply strategies to your programming to increase the participation of adult women in active living. Before we move on to the next section, I would love if everybody could just take a moment to change your name. So how you would do that is maybe hover over your image, or if you click participants, you should be able to find yourself in the list, and then you can right click and you should have the option to rename yourself. So if you could just take a moment and ensure that your name is there. So mine it says Vanessa. I've decided to include my pronouns, she, her, and then I've included where I work or my sport involvement. So if we could get everybody to just take a moment to rename themselves so that we can get a better sense of where we're all coming from and just create a bit of a networking opportunity. It's possible you'll see someone in the chat or in the participant list who's from an organization you've been looking to get in touch with, or just a new contact. So I would encourage everybody to do so. I'm joined today by Crystal Clark, who is supporting with the tech, and her name in the Zoom is tech in all caps -- Canadian Women in Sport. So if you experience any technical issues while we're on together, please feel free to send her a message and she can help you out. Amazing. I'm seeing so many people who have changed their names. This is fantastic. All right. So we're going to speak a little bit about current demographics in Canada as it pertains to, why is this such a pivotal moment to be engaging women in sport in Canada? So Canada is not unique internationally, but because of the Second World War, we had a huge baby boom. And when we talk about boomers, we know that this is a large demographic that is aging, currently sitting within their mid-50s to early 70s, and that will continue to grow within this demographic pool. We also know that women tend to live longer than men. We can expect this trend to continue with a large group of women in their 80s who still want to be physically active. More than 1.67 million people in Canada, comes out to nearly 5% of the population, self-identify as an Indigenous person, and it is the fastest growing population in Canada, growing by 42.5% within 2006 to 2016. Indigenous people also make up the largest portion of young people in Canada, with 44% under the age of 25 in 2016, and that's previously compared to 28% of non-Indigenous population. The Canadian Constitution recognizes 3 groups of Indigenous people: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And these are 3 distinct peoples with unique histories, languages, cultural practices, and spiritual beliefs. This map shows how the composition of Indigenous populations varies across the provinces and territories. First Nations constitute 63% of Indigenous populations, Inuit 4%, and Métis 32%. So this graph provides information on trends over time of female immigrants as percentage of the total female population. In 2011, National Household Survey estimated that 3.5 million immigrant women and Canadian girls in Canada represent roughly 21.2% of the country's total female population. This marks the highest proportion of immigrant women amongst Canada's women's population in 100 years. We see this as a wonderful opportunity to grow the women's sport and recreation, as we know that sport can be a fantastic tool for settlement and community building. Now we'll take a quick look at household types. Just to give you an idea, one-person households became the most common type of household for the first time in 2016. Among seniors and people aged 65 and older, about 33% of women are living alone in 2016, compared to 17.5% of men. Again, with a third of that population living by themselves, there's an opportunity for us to really grow the sport community within that age group. Knowing a lot of senior women are living on their own, again, this shows that opportunity. In 2016, the proportion of multi-generational households rose the fastest. So that was grew by 37.5% of all household types. And this type of living arrangement is more common in immigrant populations, which accounts for the growing share of population. All right, we have some quick trivia for you. This is not something that was previously mentioned. So this isn't an assessment of your listening skills, but we want to know what you believe is the most popular activity for women 18 plus. So how you're going to compete in this trivia is you're going to use the annotate feature. If you look at the top of your screen, if you're on a desktop, there should be a button that says view options. Then the third or fourth dropdown will be annotate. Once you click annotate, you'll have a menu of different sort of stamps and pencils and other features that you can use to write directly on the screen. So I'll use a stamp right now. I've placed my stamp on the screen. Okay, I can see someone else that's already know how to use it. So I want you to place a stamp in the quadrant that you believe is the correct answer. If you're unable to access annotate, you can pop your guess in the chat. So I'll give everybody about 10 more seconds. seeing walking is quite popular. Oh, hi, Mikwan. Hi, Aileen. Gardening, couple guesses. I'm seeing predominantly walking. Okay, you got about 5 more seconds and then I'm gonna clear screen. 3, 2, and 1. All right, so the correct answer was walking for exercise. Walking is the #1 activity in Canada across all age groups and genders, and it has been the top activity for decades. Women 18 years of age and over, for them, walking is almost twice as popular as the next closest activity, which is gardening and yard work. Then we have social dancing, bicycling or cycling, exercise classes, yoga, tai chi, ice skating, golfing. And then it's not until we get over here, where's my mouse? Over here, that we start to get into more of like a team sport or, competition, group competition. So I've always found that quite interesting. All right, now we're talking challenges to participation. This image is really meant to depict, a couple of those milestones that may lead a woman, off the path of physical activity for life. Again, this is not, an assumption that every woman's life takes the same course. And, that's meant to be shown by kind of all the curves. It's not linear. But again, we want to acknowledge that life events like pregnancy, changing different work, taking care of parents, illness and injury, and physical restrictions all have pose a threat to really veering off the course. And we have to be very intentional about re-engaging women and to ensure that they stay physically active for life. I want to highlight especially, caring for parents. If you're living in a multi-generational household, or if, your parents are aging, and we do see that the aging population is growing in Canada, that can be a responsibility that really takes time out of a person's life to be able to focus on their own health and wellness. So again, understanding these challenges will help in developing solutions that support getting women back on track. And by creating a constant stream of on-ramps, you'll help women choose to get involved or return to sport and active living throughout their lives. This is not intended to be, one-size-fits-all approach or really capture everybody's lived experience, but it's important to highlight all of these milestones. So the following slides will provide some of the main challenges women face to being active, as well as specific challenges for women 55 plus, newcomer women, new moms, and Indigenous women. We'll also talk about some of the ways you can help women overcome these challenges, and the information has been compiled from focus groups and pilot projects, results that were coordinated by Canadian Women in Sport from 2007 to 2020. We've categorized the challenges that we're going to discuss today as physical, emotional, social, and societal. A few of the physical challenges, beginning with health. So this is physical health, it's also mental health. And women can experience any breadth of health issues throughout their lifetime, including injuries, pain, illness, and depression. This is why it's important to provide adaptations and create a welcoming environment where women can ask questions and let you know about, the medication that they're on, or maybe any limitations they're experiencing, so you can make adjustments so they can continue to be involved. Access is a huge physical challenge. So this can be cost. This can also be proximity. I know I'm, cutting to the end here on this slide, but huge access physically right now is weather, right? So if there is a huge mound of snow between you and where you normally go for your physical activity, that's something to consider. When we talk about skills, we are, talking about here and now, the current skill level of women, whether they feel they can participate or maybe they don't have those movement skills. But this also draws from how women and girls go through the sports system without being adequately taught those fundamental movement skills. Sorry about that. So without having that foundation, it's especially difficult to return to sport. And so including skills training as part of your activities and advertising that instructions will be part of the program can give women the confidence to come and try. The actual logistics of programming can be a huge challenge as women have many different roles and competing priorities. So there's no, perfect time to run an event. And if you have the opportunity to source information from your target audience, that will really help you along the way. Transportation can be a major barrier as well. If an activity is far away and the women don't drive or have access to public transit, it could be a non-starter. So to help make transportation less of an issue, trying to partner participants to ride together or use facilities on major transit routes, or offer an educational session on how to use the public transit, that can be really beneficial. And lastly, weather, right? We know, especially this time of the year, weather can be such a challenge and really can prevent people from leaving their homes. So, obviously that's not within our control. But if there's ways to, communicate that or find workarounds or find ways to keep people engaged from home, that can be hugely beneficial. When thinking of emotional challenges, the first thing that comes to mind is guilt, especially if women are having multiple priorities. It can be hard to advocate for taking care of themselves in this capacity. So creating an environment that really empowers women to be active and take a vested interest in maintaining their health can really help them alleviate some of those emotions of guilt. Again, competing priorities and understanding that women may have multiple things on their plate at a given time. Encouraging women to schedule physical activity in their day, like an appointment, and never missing it. That can be a great way to build that habit. This is where routine can play a key role in keeping women physically active as well. So not having to take the extra time to schedule week over week and find where they can, but if it's a constant. Confidence is a big one. Women sometimes lack confidence to ask questions, especially if everyone else seems to be doing well at something without any problem. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to ask how to make an adjustment because something hurts, and they might just leave instead. So as a leader, it's important that you open the door for questions, either in a group setting or one-to-one, so women can get the information that they need. Even the most confident person can, have an issue asking questions. So really try and make yourself available and open up those lines of communication. Lastly, we have transitions. So as women age, they go through a number of life transitions and often are not sure where they fit in anymore. Participation in active living provides a great opportunity for women going through different life transitions, as it provides a fun way to plug into something and really invest in their health while being with others that share the same interest. You want to be continuing to reach out, especially with your recurring participants as well. It makes a huge difference. Instead of assuming that they will always be there, just making that extra effort to invite them. You can never, ever overestimate the power of an invitation. That's a huge, huge factor to retaining women in programming. So we have the social challenges, then we'll jump into the societal challenges, and then we'll move on to solutions. So for the social challenges, these are ones that impact the social needs of women, and without these social aspects in place, they can be a barrier to participation in physical activity and sport. So having a buddy or not having a buddy or a network that you participate in physical activity can be a major barrier to participation. Providing opportunities for women to meet outside the activity, like potlucks or coffee chats, is a great way for women to meet others and develop an active living buddy or network. Being supported to participate in active living by your family, partner, boss, or even children is very important. And women who do not have this support have cited it as a major challenge. Providing opportunities for family or workplaces to participate together is one way to be able to increase this essential support. Lastly, we have inclusion. So women like to participate in environments that are welcoming and supportive, and in many cases, cliques, regardless of age, there's no age limit on this, can be a problem. So it's important to ensure that they're not happening and that all participants feel included. Some of the ways that you can do this and that I've seen this done effectively is by creating buy-in. So if you are aware of a new participant coming that day, really putting the onus on your other like recurring participants to welcome them and say, hey, we have someone new here, I'm going to partner them with you. It'd be really great if you were able to show them around the space or to introduce them to 2 more people. That way that person, really feels like it's they're part of that welcome committee, or the space is theirs, so they're a part of bringing someone in. Lastly, we have societal challenges. So the first one here is body image. Women, regardless of age, have told us that they are self-conscious of their bodies, and with many saying they don't want to go to the gym until they lose some weight or are in better shape, or they don't have interest in wearing a specific uniform. Offering women's only in private spaces helps women to overcome these body image issues, and for many cultures where exercising in front of men is not acceptable, women's only programming can be a great opportunity for them to participate. Gender roles. So unfortunately, we still live in a society where women's participation in physical activity and sport is not considered acceptable. And this societal reflection can change throughout a woman's life. So playing softball in your youth is fine. As a mother, it may be frowned upon by community members. And as a 65-year-old woman, it might be considered bizarre. So this is especially true in many cultures where women do not participate in sport or physical activity. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to change those mindsets and social attitudes. Here we have culture. So women from different cultures have added challenges, including potentially language barriers or a lack of awareness of the opportunities around them, especially if they are new to the community. So the best way to understand how you can alleviate some of those barriers is to respectfully ask. So we would, consider that a form of consultation. And by working together to understand, we can create on both sides solutions found so that everyone can participate. So now we'll dive into some of the unique challenges within different communities. So for women 55 plus, we're looking at ageism, health issues, and then the wording. So ageism being that, certain programs are just, not meant for women a certain age. And this is a process of systemic stereotyping and discrimination against older persons. So getting pigeonholed into this idea of, okay, I'm 75 and the only programs available to me at my gym are Aquafit. But I played basketball growing up, so I don't understand why I can't participate in a basketball program. Health, of course, as we age, we can experience different health conditions. This can include, arthritis, high blood pressure, or a host of other chronic conditions, but that doesn't mean they're unable to participate in programming. And so understanding what adaptations need to be made, and again, maintaining those lines of communication so you can be aware of the adaptations required. And then wording, this is a big one. So in the women 55 plus age bracket, there are a number of different age brackets within. So again, being able to differentiate, but respectfully. A lot of people do not gravitate to programs that have the word old in them, or senior. So if you can, use language that is more enticing, but is also indicative of the target audience, you will have much better success. So for new mothers, some of the unique challenges that they face are access to childcare, and then this is a barrier, but also a success factor is partner support. So childcare is not inexpensive, and it is not readily available to everyone, especially when programs are scheduled. So if programming can be scheduled at a time when childcare is available, or if there's a way to integrate childcare into your programming, that will be alleviate a huge barrier for new mothers. Partner support is also a huge indicating factor as to whether new mothers will be able to create time to be physically active. And so if you're aware of a mother in your programming who doesn't have that support network, if there are ways that you are able to create that and enhance that, again, that will play a huge role in their ability to participate. Here are some of the unique and challenging challenges for Indigenous and newcomer women. Again, we referenced how cultural differences can be a barrier to participation, especially when a sport leader has not had any form of cultural training or anti-racism training. And so in Canada, the programming tend to be very westernized, either spoken in English or French, which can be very intimidating and inaccessible for people. Offering a variety of activities and providing information in different languages is important to engage this large and growing group of women. And inviting women to share activities and dances and sport from their background, where they can teach others how to play, is a great way to integrate. Another opportunity here is for any of those factors, or anything that alleviating that we spoke about before in order to build social connection, like food. If you're going to go spend $100 at Tim Hortons for Timbits or what have you, and coffee, maybe that money can be put to better use by having participants bring in food in sort of a potluck and being able to share aspects of their culture that way. Again, childcare, as we know that many newcomer families live in multi-generational households, childcare can be a huge barrier to their participation, similarly to new moms. So being able to share those resources and build on those networks, and maybe integrate having a youth program run at the same time as a program for women, that can be a great factor. And lastly, trauma. So women are the leaders of their family, and as such take on much of the stress families go through as they maybe deal with grief, loss, and change. Many women need support to help them through these issues. And so sport can be a great place for this, but not unless we are being intentional about reducing harm. And so I'm going to refer back to the 97th call to action in the Truth and Reconciliation report as it relates to sport, and that having culturally relevant program leaders, or at minimum, leaders who have received some form of anti-racism training to avoid inflicting harm is essential. Okay, we are moving on to the solutions. So as program leaders, we need to figure out how to create confidence, competence, and motivation for women. And these three factors come together to create, or together they make physical literacy. So we want to ensure that our programs are contributing to women's physical literacy, and what that looks like will depend on the age and stage in their life. You can have an individual who was very physically active but has sustained an injury, and they're looking for ways to adapt and re-enter sport and physical activity and regain their confidence. Confidence is always driving our will to participate, so how can we feed into women's confidence to stay active? We want to create competence. So this looks like a number of things. Creating, low commitment environments for women to join sport. These can be skills training, triad events, or orientations. You want to focus on fundamental movement skills. Again, we don't want to make any assumptions about where people are in that development. We want to offer a variety of activities so that people can have a chance to try something new and really gravitate naturally to the activities that they enjoy. And then offer that unstructured, fun environment where relationships can begin to build, and recruit women as instructors. So, you want women as instructors from the get-go, but you also want to look at your recurring participant group. Is there anyone there who can take on a leadership role and may be receptive to taking trainings? Next, we have creating confidence. So a couple of ways that we can do that is by developing women-only programs. So again, starting by creating an environment that women feel comfortable in. And for some women, they might have had a traumatic experience in sport, in a all-gender environment where they were, completely disrespected or just not able to engage fully. We want to train program leaders to read medical forms and understand the health conditions and how to be able to adapt the activities in their program plans depending on who's in the room. We want those welcoming environments. We want to develop partnerships to be able to deliver programming, especially if you're working within a community that you are not, from. And then explain programs so women know what to expect. This is a really valuable tip that I recently came across. And we've all been in that position where we've been invited somewhere and we're thinking, is there going to be a washroom there? Do I need to bring a change of clothes? So as you're going to recruit, this is going to be a key piece so that people feel comfortable when they show up and they say, okay, I have everything I need to fully participate. Lastly, you want to ask women when they want their programming and make them part of the planning process. Again, this is a part of mindfully consulting to be able to get the most successful outcome. And lastly, we want to foster motivations. There are tons of different ways to do this, but these were the top ways that we found. Food is a great motivator. It's a great social connector, and free food especially. I don't know anybody who is against free food. Developing routines. So again, this sort of ties into what we just talked about setting expectations, but routine is key to enhancing motivation. Creating environments where there can be some goal setting or potentially a reward system is highly motivating. Offering opportunities for all family members to be able to engage is a great way to ensure that women are involved. Offering cost-saving opportunities, especially if you're looking to grow your program. Bring a friend is not just a youth programming idea. it works really well for women, keeping women active. Inviting women intentionally, again, is a really great way to ensure that you're going to get people to show up. And again, it's a nice way to show appreciation to the people that you've had as recurring members. And we have, fun. It's almost self-explanatory, but again, having a positive experience is a huge dictator of whether you'll have returners. Ensuring that those connections are being made and that you're not just having a fun time, but this is also hugely beneficial to your health. People will also feel that way if you have an awareness of their health, and there's some adaptations that show, they remembered that my left knee is really sore because I have arthritis, and have all these adaptations prepared. And then scheduling special events or competitions and challenges. Again, these can be really motivational, not just for your very competitive participants, but anyone to be able to feel, like they're working towards something. All right, so that is it for me. And I am hugely excited to be able to pass the mic to our two guest speakers today, who are going to be able to provide you with a regional perspective on developing flexible programming and the lessons and successes that they've experienced. So first, you'll hear from Lindsay Johnson. She's a member of the Canadian Rangers and has been on the board of directors for the Recreation and Parks Association of Yukon for many years now. Then you'll be able to hear from Beth Hudson. She wears many hats, but has spent years now helping to develop content for national programs and training for Aboriginal sport, and has networked with the national sport bodies to inspire change and use sport and recreation as a tool for Indigenous women and youth's development to overcome barriers. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Lindsay.
Hello, ladies. Good to see you. Yeah, so my head is going all sorts of different directions now that you've presented all that stuff, Vanessa. So I'll definitely try to keep it to my little presentation here as planned. But I've definitely got lots of different things sparked in my mind. And this process has actually didn't really think much about this program that we ran until being asked to do this, and it made me think about an all-women's program and all these different thoughts in my head now. So I'll try to keep focused. First, acknowledge that I'm actually coming to you from the Rec and Parks Association of Yukon's office here in Whitehorse today, and on the traditional territory of the Tonquachin. But we are going to speak to a program that I did in Teslin, the village of Teslin, where I'm the recreation manager, which is about 200 kilometers east of Whitehorse, and pretty unique in that there's actually a joint recreation fund that covers my position, funded jointly between the village of Teslin and the Teslin Tlingit First Nation. So yeah, we set out in June of 2020 to run this girls canoe camp, thanks to the funding from CPRA's Gender Equity and Recreation Sport. And yeah, it started off as a thought for a girls canoe camp, but we'll get into all the different ways it's morphed since. But just a little background, I guess, about Teslin being a rural community on the banks of Teslin Lake and the Sutton River. As mentioned, is the traditional territory of the Teslin Tlingit First Nation, and the majority of residents are Teslin Tlingit Council members. So in Yukon in general, there's a really rich history of paddling, and at the time, there was no kind of paddle programs happening in Teslin. Prior to my time in Teslin, I was up in Old Crow, which is the most northern remote community in Yukon. And I was up there for about 5 years. And that's where I kind of got into paddling and got to know Jane Vincent, who was the instructor as part of this camp, and really made a connection to paddling. You know, the great bridge it creates between recreation, kind of being able to provide modern day exercise and enjoyment, recreation, and the cultural traditional pursuits and exploring the traditional territory and the land. I also had the amazing opportunity of going to the 2017 North American Indigenous Games, which took place in Toronto as part of the paddling team. So really saw the neat, unique opportunity that paddling presents for kids in rural communities to get out of their community and participate in some of these larger activities. So at the time, I moved to Teslin, thought we need to get this paddling going again for multiple reasons. There hadn't been it. It's a great way to get out on the land. And also, we can kind of move ahead here, that in the rural communities, oftentimes there's not numbers for big group sports. So, kind of some more of these individual pursuits are really neat. Also, the chance to connect kids with other kids from other communities becomes really important. Oftentimes in the communities, kids kind of pull each other away from stuff rather than pushing people into it. So having been up here in the Yukon and now down here and seeing how paddling can maybe be this really neat opportunity to bring the kids together in a common interest was one of the reasons that we sparked this program in Teslin as well. So when the funding came out for the gender equity, it really kind of connected some dots in my mind. Jane Vincent, this Paddle Canada instructor, is this fierce landlady that just like you could go anywhere with and like trust. And she had been on a couple canoe trips with me up in Old Crow. Got thinking about how we can incorporate her into helping me start up a program in Teslin as well. Saw the gender equity funding. So here we are. Let's come up with a girls focused canoe camp, kind of like a leadership development camp. So we are going to go for 3 days, 2 nights. It was going to be scored around the girls age 9 to 15, with some of the main goals to give the girls, the foundational skills to safely navigate water in canoes, and then kind of more technical skills of actually like eddies and turns and like the actual paddle kind of instruction. But just this experience on the land with them, camping out, kind of the leadership components of helping prepare meals along the way, and just kind of this bigger picture idea. But it was really centered around kind of that core age group that we tend to work with in the communities of 9 to 15 years old. And then COVID happened. As we all know, 2020 led to a lot of adaptation and the need to be flexible. And it was really easy, I think, in a lot of smaller communities to kind of shut down and let it be. And that really went against everything that I understood my role to be. So we just had to get really creative and think about how it can happen. So the goal remained the same. Let's get this camp going because it's really important and it's, this great opportunity. But how could we do that? So we kind of shifted our focus to like family groups. So like, can we get moms and daughters? Because then they're in the same boat. We're totally meeting these original requirements of the space, the safe sex, keeping in bubbles. So kind of the camping went off the table, but we started to focus on a family group. So can we get moms and daughters? And can they drive themselves? And so it became quickly a shift that we can't bring 10 kids in a bus and go camping. So we adapted it also to be more focused on day trips and kind of staying closer to Teslin, which was really great too, which I'll kind of get into when we talk about some of the other picture slides. It made it more accessible. And a few of the ladies that ended up joining us were able to kind of suggest places to go that we hadn't really thought of before. And it really made for like a real engaging experience, because we actually ended up in the backyard of one of our participants going up the Morley, and she had never been in a canoe before. And she had always been really wanting to navigate this little body of water to her camp in canoe, which is why she ended up signing up once the ages opened up. And we ended up using her house, which I'll show you later in the slide. So all in all, COVID happened, but it actually ended up being one of the greatest things that I'll also talk about later, because it really changed my perspective with how we're going about delivering our programs and how we're focusing on who we're attracting. So all in all, it ended up working out great. And so we ended up with really neat, unique groups of girls. So our ages ended up being 10 to 58 years old. We had a mom that brought 3 daughters along with her, a mom that brought a daughter and a foster daughter. We had a grandma and granddaughter. And then we had Jane as our lead canoe instructor, myself as the recreation staff, and I had 2 summer students that were both female at the time. So we had a really, really neat mix of gals, and yeah, it was just a really, really great experience. So some of the main successes that we had with it were definitely the great mix of female participants, the wider age group for sure. And we definitely saw an amazing skill progression and interest in canoeing that spurred out of this. A few of the ladies and the younger girls had never been in canoes before. So it really like gave them the opportunity to explore something in a like safe and environment, like encouraging environment. And yeah, they got really comfortable on the water and really great moving their canoes around even on the land. Like it was really neat. One of the days was focused specifically on kind of like some dry land leadership development, where we brought in some of the older girls to talk about more like how would you lead a group, even of your friends, like how would you plan the trip, how would you go about like meal prep and that kind of stuff, which is really great. And I actually just got off the phone when I was thinking about this presentation and trying to grab a few more pictures, and a couple of the ladies are talking that they're in the works right now of planning their own trip for this summer, which is really amazing. One of the initial goals I failed to mention earlier was the bigger, broader program of canoeing for the community was going to culminate in a river trip, like a multi-day, 5-day river trip down the Nisutlan River back into the village of Teslin. And so we ended up 4 of our participants from this girls' canoe program ended up joining us for that river trip too, which was kind of a main goal. And so a great, awesome outcome that they wanted to come with us. So, and another thing, like, again, I'll kind of circle around in many different ways in the next few minutes, but it really helps spur this other program that wasn't just for females, but was a broader mixed group, kind of open to anyone. So this initial girls camp, or, not girls in the end of it, but female canoe weekend really helped build this bigger program that we're calling the Warriors of the Water, and that we've continued to do since this initial one. So next one is Ria, who is one of our older participants that hadn't really had that much experience, and like maybe was a little thrown off by the age group, decided to do it anyways because she really wanted to get in canoe. So for her, she really speaks some really nice words about it. The opportunity came at a perfect time. It was a good chance to experience one of my passions with all ages of girls and women, learning from and sharing with each other. Sharing the wilderness experience with the kids was wonderful. It really was all ages and abilities. Even the children had something to teach us as we were in the middle of nowhere navigating this body of water. It really fostered that kindred spirit amongst us. So that was a really great quote that actually their CPRA did a little article about this program. So they had interviewed Ria. So I really thought those were neat words, because it really, again, spurred this thought, like, why do we focus on specific ages kind of with programs? And, sometimes people get thrown off by this age dynamic, like this is a program for kids. And we can just kind of scroll through some of the pictures now as I go rogue a little bit. So it's good. It's okay. So when I mentioned that we ended up using this is the backyard of one of our participants that wouldn't have been on it had we just focused on the girls, and had been so locked into where we were going and what we were doing. So again, COVID really presented this opportunity to think outside the box. And here we are kind of off the banks of Morley Bay, having a little lunch before going to navigate the water you see in behind here up, and we ended up going up to the cabin. So it was really neat and kind of went rogue on the original plans. So and then the next is just a whole bunch of pictures from the next few days. But as mentioned, it kind of really helps me change my perspective and how we're delivering programs, and really start focusing on interest-based and not age-based programs. And that has continued over the next, like, since this, and really speak to it as a member of RPA and somebody that's worn a few different hats working in recreation in Yukon. And I will always kind of keep my old crow hat on because they're small and struggling right now. And so I just kind of speak behalf it's really a different perspective when we don't have the numbers in certain age ranges to really kind of lose that thought that our programs are specifically for this after school cohort of like 6 to 9 year olds or this. If we can get more kids and adults engaged working together on an interest base, like there's just so much more room for success. And it's not flawless by any means, and it's going to take some time to, I think, shift some of the dynamics of what community recreation has tended to look like. It's been very synonymous with youth and kind of a childcare service type piece, specifically in Yukon. I can speak to that, but really trying to break that down and be like, no, we are recreation. It should be interest based. It should be skill development based. And yeah, so you can just keep plopping through the pictures until we get to that. But as I said, I kind of circled back around loosely. Fast forward to summer of 2021, and we're continuing with this program. And one of my summer students has come out to be transgender, and she will now be he. And so that again has shifted some of my thinking that it needn't be necessarily gender based either, not age based. Again, coming around this new perspective, and through the process of this last little while of having garnered some attention because of the gender specificity of this program and the successes that we had engaging multiple ages women, has got me thinking too that there is that importance. And again, watching your presentation, Vanessa, I was like, yeah, there really is a value to these female. And even though I've kind of shifted perspective since this, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, we have to do this again. As I'm re-looking through these pictures and re-listening to some of Ria's words and rethinking about how you guys have approached me to present on this, I was like, oh yeah, I totally veered off from the gender based because of a youth in my life that's needed to be included too, and breaking down some of that. So it's really sparked lots of thoughts kind of going through this process. And I think that's kind of it in terms of any sense of formality that I had with this. But yeah, so again, we were very lucky to explore this. I'll leave that other kind of thought just more up for discussions later. But here we have a couple of the family groups that we had, and we ended up getting to go all the way up Morley Bay on a good day, normally paddling upstream because the wind had picked up so much, but we ended up getting stuck out there. So we had to portage canoes, and it really turned into quite an adventure. So again, the lack of the need to adapt and change, it really ended up being our greatest success. While COVID presented to squash it all, it ended up presenting a whole different path. And as I know, I've seen a lot of people when they change their locations or maybe in smaller centers that need to just kind of be able to go with the flow and not be shut down. It's been really good. And I've been very fortunate to have the support of our council too. So this is, you see the guys in this picture. So this ended up being our first group that went down the Newcomer River. So the participants on the right are the gals that had been part of the canoe program. And then we were joined by some boys. And then we did the same Newcomer River last year. And our ages, it was a mix, male and female, but our ages ranged from 1 to 68 years old. So the program itself has really presented a really great opportunity to bring, different community members together that wouldn't normally be in a program together. And we've had really great success with the whole program. It hasn't necessarily stayed gender specific, but it's been a really great program for the community and experience for me personally. So thank you very much. And hopefully that covered some of what I was supposed to do. And often definitely open to questions and conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. That was awesome, and these photos are fantastic. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but I'm already thinking about stuff like you said, like sport and recreation. These programs are so like rooted in age, and even the gender binary, we know is very exclusive to a lot of individuals. So yeah, how do we create those opportunities but don't feel bound by them? I think is a really interesting idea to just like noodle on for a bit. But I'm going to pass the mic to Beth, and I'm gonna just remind everybody, if you have any questions, you'll have an opportunity to ask at the end, but you can also populate them in the chat right now. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in there, and I'm going to pass the mic to Beth.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Hudson. A lot of you in this room, actually, I know, which is really awesome. I'm so grateful to also be here with Lindsay and hear everything she's doing. It's so incredible. And I am more excited, I think, than anything that we have the opportunity as Northerners right now to really share our stories. I think that a lot of my journey over the last 10 years, especially, has really been learning to understand myself better as an Indigenous person, to better understand Indigenous ways of knowing and what it means to really build a relationship with the land, develop my own ways of knowing, which are often holistic. We know that Indigenous viewpoints are often holistic. And just in listening to the chat so far and hearing what, Lindsay is up to, and even the points about, gender and understanding and all of these different layers of how do we design these sorts of programs that are inclusive and still encouraging really enhanced participation and meaning for populations that we're trying to support and encourage. It's really, really amazing and encouraging, because the work that I do now is all about, holistic support and ways of knowing. Come here, puppy. My little bush puppy right now is who joins me on all of my adventures, is eager to play, but yeah, my life is really awesome right now. I'm currently working for Dutcho First Nation. So I'm coming to you from Kwidli First Nation in Denendeh, which is also known as Dene Nation, or where really a lot of the Dene groups currently exist. I am currently the regional on the land coordinator for Dutcho First Nations, which is really interesting. And in what I'm going to chat about a little bit today over the work I've been doing in the North over the past 10 years, I really just want to make sure that, yeah, thank you, Miquan, for real. She got me. Yeah, I just really want to solidify these ideas that are already coming out about being inclusive, about rooting programming in community, about rooting programs an opportunity to build connection, to build community, to build relationships, to learn important knowledge for ourselves and our communities and pass that on. It's so, so cool. And so I know, as Vanessa said earlier, I wear a lot of hats. A lot of people, again, know me as this person who just likes to get involved. I like to say yes. I like to try new things. I really love the network that I've developed, where I have these opportunities to speak on experiences I've had and share the stories that I've had, because these stories aren't mine to always tell. My own practice, my own perspectives, what I do now in my everyday life has always been informed by the youth and community that I work with. And I'm so grateful to be able to share some of these photos from earlier when I first came to the Northwest Territories in 2013. These photos are from Fort Providence, which is a community in the Dutcho region, and is actually a community that I call home now, which for a disconnected youth who was adopted by a non-Indigenous family and raised in a southern urban center, this is like everything to me. This is life. And it's so incredible that I'm now in a position where I get to help others reconnect and find that meaning and passion for life. And what's really come out of it are all of these really important learnings about how do we support community and youth and women and vulnerable populations and adults and anyone who really wants to engage, especially during a pandemic. We've noticed that if anything, people just want that connection and to engage. So this is the perfect time for me to chat more about it. As you can see here, this is just an example of some of the programming that we might have run in Fort Providence when I was involved in more like physical literacy, sport and recreation sort of stuff. And it was the first time that I ever had the experiences to run land-based camps. I'm definitely come from the South, where I have all of these, these program ideas and rules and structures and designs, and, we're told how to run these programs to gain participation. And when we try those programs up here, no one would really show up, because no one really wants to be told what they have to do or be talked down to or be given, a prescription for activity or wellness. What they want is community, what they want is relationships. What they want is to be able to learn important skills and knowledge that has been lost for a long time. And what's really, really cool is that, especially in the North right now, is that we are blended communities of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people from all sorts of backgrounds. And a lot of what we do now is how can we keep programs inclusive for everyone? That idea of ethical space where people from all backgrounds of life, genders, ages are able to all come together and build community and support each other, and make sure that we're making meaningful programming where people, again, are finding happiness, are finding connection, are finding the desire to pass these things on to their family, to get more involved. You can see here, this is the first time I myself had ever started to learn traditional skills. And that's why I love to share them, because I was here with these youth and these elders learning these skills. These sorts of programs, online programs, can take place during recesses, at school, after school, at home, through recreation programming, through sports teams. Anyone can really start to use land-based programming to help build their programs and build that connection. You saw especially that women love to be out and walking around and just moving and connecting and seeing things and being with each other. We know that about, how we understand differences between how females and males and then different gender identities in between might engage in programming. And what you see here, as I was going through my photos, of course, are all the young girls, the young ladies who are just so happy to be there with role models and caring adults that care about them and love them and want to pass on these teachings. You can see us cutting up dry meat right there, little Sheena and Teresa Bonnaroo. She's an elder from Fort Providence. Simply just going out at recess time with some dry meat and doing some dry meat making. You can see there little Summer and I with mud on our faces. We decided that the youth in the community a couple summers ago were bored, and they were like, what kind of fun activity can we do together? And I always like to go to the youth and say, what kind of activities would you want to do? And all of them were like, let's do a mud run. Let's do a cool mud run. And of course, those are the kinds of things you can do with no money and no time or really any prep or, depending on conditions, you can really think outside the box. And so I'm always just about, when we're running programming with participants, including them in it, including them in their ideas and their wants and their passions and what they're interested in. I didn't really think that I was going to get, a group of young girls coming out, coating themselves in mud and just running around in the bushes with me. But that is such a freeing and worthwhile experience. And we know that play is kind of a lost element that we don't even use anymore. That's important for our adults too. For healing, we know that especially in Indigenous communities, healing is so important, and that play-based learning is what's going to get us there. And so even thinking about a community lens with adults, with people of all ages, with different genders, if we're able to continuously, again, make them fun, make them engaging, really provide these opportunities that we don't really have a ton of anymore, it's really meaningful. And I'm working now for an organization, a regional Indigenous government, that it's really, really cool. We're trying to actually provide services through education, lands and resources, health and wellness. We're starting to get to the point now where we're in negotiations with the Crown to actually become an independent regional Indigenous government, which is really, really cool. And so it's really, really important that we have these opportunities to share these learnings and teachings and what we're doing, because we want others to see, to find these pieces and build them into their programs, because it's so amazing to see that happen. We ran an empowerment program out of there as well that was for youth on the land leaders, but also for fitness. Maybe we can go to the next slide really quickly on here, because there's some good, oh yeah, this is a really good one. I'll talk about this one first. So part of what I do for Decho First Nations, of course, is as regional on the land coordinator, I work with 10 Indigenous communities that are First Nations and Métis across the region. And it's really important, of course, again, that we're really trying to facilitate these avenues for passing on knowledge, especially traditional knowledge, and building the skills to walk in two worlds, because we need to know how to operate within governance structures and certain politics and whatnot, but we do want to be providing services to our entire nation, our entire region, that are based in Indigenous ways of knowing, that are based in Decho Coyote, which for in Genejati, the language here means taking care of the Decho, which is our river. So we have our big river that goes through the whole region. It's one of the biggest ones in the world. You can look it up. And that is truly like a way of life, a framework for a way of life for so many here. And it's really, really cool that now we're starting to do things like use our natural infrastructure to start to develop these programs around. And what does that mean? And so this was a really, really cool program that I wanted to share in the context of this conversation because of how it really targets females or individuals that really identify more in kind of the female gender spectrum, or in a more of a traditional cultural sense, are more geared towards learning these sorts of traditional skills and passing them on, because we actually need more elders and knowledge holders that are fluent in language, that are fluent in traditional skills like hide tanning, which is a way of life for communities up here, right? It's truly a way of life. It influences education, language, employment, so many things. It's so cool to see. And this hide tanning camp is a program that we tried to run last year during the pandemic. We had to change it just because we had a little bit of a potential outbreak within our region, but we are hoping to run it again this year. And I wanted to touch on it because it's really incredible what we're trying to do. Basically, the NWT, sorry, Yukon, you're kind of a part of this too, but the NWT actually has the most land-based programs per capita in the world globally right now, which is incredible. It's amazing. And like, I'm going to say the North, because we know that Yukon and Nunavut too, very much on the same train as we are, doing very similar programs. What you see here is a really cool apprenticeship program that we had designed, where we have the whole essence of it is not just to provide community with an opportunity to come out and learn hide tanning from knowledge holders and elders, but we actually had a cohort selected from across Turtle Island, many of them Northerners, who had actually applied and demonstrated that they want to become true knowledge holders and elders in hide tanning one day. And so we're building those steps for them to become that. And so this hide tanning camp, for example, is actually going to be, again, hosted in the Decho region. We're going to have a bunch of knowledge holders, local knowledge holders there. We'll have hides, we'll have the tools, we'll have all of the equipment, we'll build a beautiful community, and we'll have 8 to 10 apprentices there. And I thought this was so relevant to the conversation because last year our cohort was all female. They were all incredible young Indigenous females, again, from across Turtle Island, eager to learn these incredibly detailed and complex skills, because they want to take on that knowledge to pass it on to the next generation. And you can see how you can build these really cool, like, knowledge passing strategies through opportunities like this. And it's really exciting. And these are the kinds of things that I would love for more people to reach out to me about in their worlds. If they ever have ideas about on the land program, about ways to include Indigenous ways of knowing, or even just general sport, recreation, physical activity things. I love helping people to think outside the box, to think about lowering costs, to think about collaborating, to think about, what ways can we make these opportunities meaningful? So really wanted to chat about the HIDE program, and if people are interested, please check Decho First Nation social media over the next little bit, because we're going to try and make it happen again this year, and I would love to share updates on that. And yeah, I'll just kind of quickly wrap up some of my experiences with the next slide, which is just talking about, again, some more of this female empowerment that just happened organically. Almost all the programs I run, I never specifically try to identify a certain demographic, because that's just not the way it works in community up here. What I do is I listen to community voices, I listen to what people are wanting and hoping for, and I try and facilitate those opportunities in a way that might work for them or work for community. And I really wanted to share this last little bit of some of the work that I had done intentionally in Prov, specifically around fitness and community fitness, because I think maybe that would be interesting for some people in the room on how to maybe get some more female participation in some extracurricular activities. But when I moved to Fort Providence in 2013, I wasn't the first physical literacy coordinator to work in Fort Providence at Degas School. The previous person had already done the work to buy and establish 2 amazing sort of fitness centers within the community. One that was in the school, and that's what you see here. Essentially, I came to the community with certification and personal training and some experience in fitness. And then I was kind of working in the school with all of the kids, taking care of all the recreation programming. Again, wearing all these hats, kind of working like 8 a.m. to midnight every day. It was great though. I had lots of breaks, but every day was just get up and try something. Let's try and have fun today. Let's make something meaningful happen today. what I noticed really quickly is as soon as I started hosting these free fitness nights, we started running boot camp. People wanted boot camp. We started running boot camp from like either at lunchtime or from 5 to 6 every day in the school gym. And it was really the high school students that first started asking for that. And so you can kind of see there's Michaela and Christina are in these photos. They're two of the youth that really drove this. We ended up having a small group that started with just kind of high school students that were interested in fitness and what that meant. And they had someone who had a background in it. And we were like, let's go ahead and get this going. It started off with, maybe 10, 12 high school students coming regularly. It was fun. Other community members started to come in. We had maybe 20 or so community members coming in every day for this program. But then all of a sudden I started getting, I was building relationships with youth of all ages and whatnot. And I was starting to get like 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old girls outside the gym at those times, standing by the doors. And if you work in community, you know what community is like, and there's kids everywhere. And it occurred to me, they wanted to be in there with us because they knew it was a safe space. They saw we were doing something fun and they were intrigued. At that age group, 7 to 9, that's when a lot of those body issues start to come up. They're struggling, they're trying to find themselves. I realized fairly early on, the way I had set up these fitness classes already were all participant based. They were all like easily scalable to people's skill level. They were always fairly simple, straightforward, and they would always be a good workout. So you'd always end the day sweaty with your friends. We did it, see you tomorrow. It was awesome. We kind of built that community space. But then the young girls started to come in. And that was really cool because I did everything as appropriately as I could in terms of not allowing them to have loaded weights or anything. But all of a sudden I was getting 10 or so young girls out to just be with us in this space. They would do circuit workouts with us. They would do the sit-ups and push-ups. And we would establish rules and expectations together where it was like, if you want to be here, we want you to be here. It's a safe, healthy space for you. Come be with us. But you do have to follow some rules and what's reasonable for you. Don't disrupt people when they're working out. Be safe, look out for each other. And if you're going to be here, you can't be playing around with weights and having those sorts of conversations. But when you have a safe space like that, you can have those conversations with youth. And the cool thing about youth is that as long as you give them some autonomy, some control, and some respect, they're going to be all in with you. And that's what we saw. And it ended up becoming this really cool thing where we would have 40 people in community show up for boot camp sometimes. Like 40 people in a small gym running lines and doing sit-ups together. And this photo of us flexing was one of the last fitness sessions I ever ran in Fort Providence before I moved on. It was a pretty somber time for that, but it was amazing, again, just to know that so many women and really a lot of people had benefited from this, and that we had, again, young girls looking up to the teenagers were there, and the teenagers that were there looking up to the women that would come in. And then we had elders, we had knowledge holders, we had older women that would want to come in too and just be a part of it as well, which was so cool. And so I just really wanted to highlight just some of those experiences that I've had success in over the years in the North that were relevant to this conversation. Again, we could talk for hours. But if anyone has any other ideas or suggestions, or again, I know some of you know me a little bit and some of you probably know Lindsay too, which is really awesome. And based on what we've talked about, if there's any ideas or suggestions or things we can chat about with you that would be really beneficial for the conversation, like please let us know. And if you have want our info or anything, please let us know. And I'll pass it back to Vanessa now. And
no, Beth, I was just gonna say, I know you plugged your socials a bit ago about the apprenticeship, and I'm positive that everybody's like, I'm ready to follow along. So if you have those links available, please feel free to put them in the chat now.
Absolutely.
I think you definitely should do that.
Absolutely. And I'll put my contact info. I'm always open to chat. People hopefully know that. I love my network. My network is vast. Every individual that talks with me, I consider you a part of my network. So everyone in this room, please, let's chat. I love chatting with everyone because even just sharing our ideas and thoughts, you inspire me to try new things. And that's the coolest thing, the coolest learning I've learned over the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic, when we're all still trying to run on the land programming, is truly sharing is caring. Open up the doors, don't silo yourself. I'm working with education, I'm working with lands and resources, I'm working with every department you could ever imagine, and we're doing some real cool stuff just because the funding is there and the desire is there to just help support community now. And yeah, let's get people healthy and connected and just feeling well during this time. I think we all need it. So that's the dream, and that's what I'm here to help everyone do. And really love having, again, everyone that loves to reach out and share ideas. It's just amazing. And I'm gonna end myself now just reinforcing that idea of collaboration and communication, and knowing that like I'm always eager to chat, and I hope other people are too, because I just think we need more of that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, thank you so much, both you and Lindsay. I have like 3 Post-its here that just have all of those gold nuggets that you were able to share. And just a lot to think about. I feel like I'm going to be processing this for a couple of days. But I want to open the floor to all of the participants. Please feel free to pop your questions in the chat, or we're a bit of a smaller group. So if you feel more comfortable to just unmute and ask, I invite you to. I see Beth has just added her contact in the chat. So if you're looking for it, that's where it is right now. And we are in a moment, if there are any questions that come up right now, I'm going to launch a poll just to get some feedback from your experience for all the attendees. Okay, there's Lindsay's as well. Okay, so we have the poll up. If you could just take a couple minutes to complete these questions, just so we don't have to send a story survey, which you can also access in the link in the chat. I'll just chat through as this is going on. I really want to thank Beth and Lindsay so much for your time and for your knowledge that you shared today. I'm leaving feeling really light and highly motivated to, again, just like tackle all of these ideas that we have about how things are meant to be. It's supposed to be delivered this way, and you have a really narrow window for age group, or it's based on solely on gender, or who can be involved. And so I think you've given me so much to think about, and I'm hoping that our participants feel the same way. I think there are 4 questions in here. I think we've gotten almost everybody's vote, but I'll give it another 10. Yep, we're good. Thank you, Crystal. Let me just resume sharing screen. That's it for us. I really want to thank the Canadian Parks and Rec Association. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you so much to our speakers for your invaluable knowledge and time, and also just those pictures. They all gave me so much life. And Mikon, there'll be a link as well, so you can complete it if you missed the poll. That's okay. And yeah, I'm available to stay on and be here to facilitate the answering of any questions. But that's it for us today. So if you have any questions or any feedback for the chat, I welcome it.